So this is Allie, owner of the channel. So basically we went to Springfest White Plains a couple weeks ago and ended up going X1 in Swiss, ended up in second place in Swiss, and then got knocked out first round of top 8, unfortunately, so we finished 6th overall, but still a good run. So we figured might as well post these deck profiles in case anyone's looking for stuff for the current format, even though we're getting pretty close to a set, but better late than never. So I guess I'll start us off with my Dragoncraft list. My personal record was X3, I believe, overall. So here we go. So leader first is Rowan from set 1. I like shiny cards and I just think he's neat. Moving on, I'll just go by mana cost. So we've got 3 Bellringer Angels plus 1 of the Evo. She's just your best play on your first turn, just to set up some early protection and cycle some cards. The Evo, if you play her on 1 and have nothing to do on your second turn, then you can always evolve her, deal with an early threat. It's pretty good value. We also run 3 because of a different card that we'll talk about in a bit, but there's some synergy there. Other 1-drops, we've got our spells. We've got 3 Blazing Breath. Pretty bonkers. That's just an Angelic Strike, I believe, whatever the neutral one is. But if you're an Overflow, which you will be pretty often with this deck, because this is Ramp Dragon if I didn't mention it. But if you're an Overflow, then it'll be doing 4 damage instead, which is pretty nuts for 1 mana. Good flexibility, good at dealing with early threats, pretty needed in every Dragoncraft list, I believe, so we've got 3 of those. And finally for our 1-drops, we got 3 copies of the Dragon's Nest. This is another thing that you can either do on your first turn or just weave in if you've got an extra mana, you don't know what else to do throughout the game. You can sack it to heal for 2 anytime, which never really came up with me. I always waited until Overflow. If Overflow is active, then you heal 2 and draw a card instead, so that's good value, especially since you're kind of just weaving it in where you have spare mana, so it ends up somewhat costing 0 in a sense. So good value, good healing. This deck heals a lot, and this is an important part of that, so we run 3. Next up, Elephant in the Room, Dragon Oracle. This is a ramp deck. You want the ramp spell, and you want to see this very often, which is why we run a Tide 40. So always keep this in the mulligan. Often mulligan for this if you don't see it in your first hand. And playing it on your first turn 2, it just kind of skews the whole game, so you gotta see it. And even later on, it's not the worst because you can cycle it for a draw. Or there's some applications where you might want to just ramp even more, even in later turns. Speaking of those applications, we've got Colin Crimson Yaksha, or Sybil of the Waterworm. She's got a fanfare if you're an Overflow, so 7 mana or more. You gain stats, 1/1, and you also ramp 1. That ramp is pretty huge in bridging the gap for your later plays. So you've got, if you're on Overflow, so turn 7, or whatever turn you have 7 mana, you really just don't have that much to do on your turn 8, so you kind of just always want to skip to 9, and she really facilitates this. In addition, she's good on your turn 6 if you have a Dragon Oracle hanging out, because you can ramp up to 7, play this with your remaining points, go up to 8, and then you've got your turn 9 open up, so pretty important. The healing is pretty huge too, so we run 3. Dragon Warrior. I was on Dragoneer for a while, for our last regionals actually. It's very hard to stick a different Dragoncraft follower in these types of lists, so I went back to Dragon Warrior. So 3/3, evolves for 1. On evolve, deal 3 damage to something. That's enough to clear a lot of threats, and then you can rush into something for 4. So mandatory 2 for 1. This is your most proactive play on your early turns, and it can swing boards sometimes, so gotta run 3. What else do we got? We got 2 of the Goblin Princess, plus 1 of the Evo. So this pulls out our Bellringers, so it kind of thins the deck of a card. and then the Bell Ringer will draw you another card, so it's huge for consistency. It's also kind of redundant with the Dragon Warrior in a sense, if you use the Evo, because she's an early rusher that leaves behind the board, so another pseudo 2-for-1, not as good, but you make it work. And also on Evo, she gives you one of these tokens into the EX area, which is just a 4-mana 6/6 ward, so good swing, especially against aggro. But yeah, just 2-1 splits for now. Continuing with the 3-drops, we've got a lot of them. We've got Serpent Wrath, another dual purpose card like the Blazing Breath. You deal 5 to something. If you're an overflow, you draw a card. So good value. It can help you on brick later in the game. Early in the game, it doesn't really hurt too much to just play for the basic effect, because 5 mana deals with a lot of important threats, namely buff to Mock Knights and stuff like that. So you want to get this gone, and this does the job. And lastly, for 3-drops, we've got Night's Way. This card, I really wanted to run more, but it clogs very easily. But you always want to see it. You never hate to see this. It's mainly here as a silver bullet against discard control type decks. This guarantees that you always have a play even if they ditch your whole hand. And in the late game, if you get into some grindy mirror matches or other control matchups, this ensures that you always have something to play. So yeah, you only run 1 because it depends on you having an empty EX area, so 2 wouldn't do anything. But it's kind of carried a lot. Next, we've got 3 Fortes and 2 of the Evos. This is just good surprise burst. You can brick on these a little bit early, but if your opponent kind of left no mana, then sometimes you can just play this for 4, get in some 5 damage. But normally this is just your finisher. 7 bursts that he can't really respond to is always going to be pretty good. Next, we've got our 5-drops. So we've got 3 copies of Dark Angel Olivia. This is good against aggro. If they're close to top decking, then you can make them discard the last card or something like that. It's good healing. The draw sometimes helps get you out of a rough spot. Although, if you've got your Night's Way set up, then sometimes you don't need that draw. So I often just heal and discard with this effect. Sometimes you actually go for the Evo points with this because of Israfil that we'll talk about later, but if you're not able to ramp over your turn 8 and actually have to play it out, then having a Evo point ready to go to evolve an Israfil, that's always important. So very versatile card. Cut off on buying these for a while, but they're kind of needed. Then obviously one of Shenlong, one of the Evo. I feel like this could come back to 3, honestly, but we'll do what we can. So not as much synergy as in Discard Dragon, but still draw 2, ditch 1, heal 5. Very coherent with what this deck wants to do. Although sometimes it's hard to weave in the 7 mana, but if you can, it's worth it. Conflagration, probably the only reason why this deck can exist at all. Against aggro, you really just want to ramp into Conflag, and the game kind of swings in your favor from there. So it's just a good board wipe against a lot of early aggression. And might have applications later against auras, just as a way of non-targeting dealing effect damage, but that comes up less. Yeah, no 6-drops, no 7-drops. We've got 8-drops. We've got 3 Israfils, 2 of the Evo. This is also an nail in the coffin against aggro decks. If you establish this and they can't answer it, then they can no longer have Ward ever again. It's also more healing, which the deck always likes to do. So pretty self-explanatory. It's kind of the reason why we're playing Ramp Dragon instead of any other Dragon archetypes in this format. So gotta have Israfil. And finally, we've got 3 Bahamut's plus 1 of the Evo. Shout out my gift to myself. Ultimate. I didn't have this for the tournament, but still. We run 3 because this deck kind of ramps a lot and then can just kind of not really have much of an answer to, or not really have much of a game plan besides outvaluing the opponent, clearing their boards. and I feel like especially in the mirror matches, Bahamut is very important for that. I believe my round 1 opponent was also on Ramp Dragon, and they ran 2 Bahamuts, and that was probably the deciding factor in those back and forth matchups where you just answer their threats, set up your own, go back and forth with that interaction. It's always good to be able to have the last laugh. That Evo comes up as good surprise burst damage because it's just a free evolution, making him harder to remove. It also has some applications against notably Discard Dragon, but also Necrocharge Abyss. If you can deal with their amulet that would otherwise recycle them back to Nekthar, that's pretty good. So this along with Israfil is kind of the deck's endgame. So yeah, 3 is important. And that's about it for this list, I think. GG's. Shout out my teammates. Played very well, carried us through some rounds. And shout out Burn 1 SVE channel, because I believe this is literally just their list with -1 Genesis Dragon, +1 Bahamut. So, good stuff.
Hello everyone, I am AJ Selsovic from Team Cook Billion. I am here with my 6th place Runecraft deck profile from the White Plains Springfest Regional, and I'll just get into it. So I'm going to start out with my leader. Like I said, I played Rune. So Jeremiah Godwald, wasn't rocking this during the event, picked it up as a reward for myself afterwards. Shout out Orange, the goated flag. Next up is only play 3 amulets in this version. So as you'll see later on, I am on Chimera, but this is just a good piece of healing, and it has some incidental synergies later on in the profile that I'll get into. This is pretty much just different fights list, but it did me a lot of good in the tournament, so just kind of explaining the utility of the list more in depth than when he went into it. So next up is 3 copies of Insight, standard, just basic draw for any spell-based deck. 3 Mystic Ring. So like I said, on Chimera, you don't need to lean as much into the rigging the bottom of the deck as normal Chimera lists, but this can still be helpful just in terms of getting cards out of your hand, especially if you're against a discard matchup like Abyss. Next up is 3 Angelic Snipe, clearly superior compared to Lamplit Training. I'm just messing. I played this because I was just too lazy to move my Lamplets out of my Earthright deck, and they're functionally the same card since we aren't on Agnes. Next up, 3 Trail of Light. So staple in any Runecraft list that's all about building Spellchain. Just draw a card, or the effect you're actually going to use when discarded, draw a card. Next up, 1 copy of Chain of Calling. So the previous list I was on 3 copies of this card, but because you can just grab it with Merlin, recast it from grave with Merlin's Evo, you really, I feel like, only need 1. So 1 copy of that, just to search for playmakers and creatures. 2 Rhymewind. So this deck, really, even though it can play for the board, having premium removal like this is really helpful. And the Spellchain 10 does definitely come up just to seal your opponent's draw. So sometimes it'll be used to put back big unevolved threats, but sometimes you'll just put back a smaller threat just to prevent your opponent from drawing a better card per turn. Next up is 3 Surefire Bullets. 3 is a good breakpoint, and especially against Evos, 4 is a good breakpoint in this format, I feel. Deals with Mock Knight, deals with Dragon Warrior, not much more to say. And then 1 Demonic Strike. Like you'll see later in the profile, we are on Merlin. You really only use it for closing out games for damage to face, or off of Merlin for the 6 damage play with her Evo. But yeah, sometimes in the worst case it can just be a good budget Surefire Bullet to kill something for 3. 3 Witch Bolt, love this card. 5 is a really good breakpoint, kills Olivia's. It also can be a good card to discard, because then you can just replay it from grave with Merlin's Evo and get the draw, since obviously you have an Evo on board. one Fate's Hand, same logic as the one Chain of Calling. A good spell, but you can get it with Merlin. You can play it from grave with Merlin. So one copy I feel like was enough. One copy of Concentration. So once again, as with the amulets I was playing, the gingerbread houses, this card is just good because it has healing attached to it. A lot of times there's just things running around that can just burst you down really quick. Aggro Sword, Azazel in Abyss, anyone who's still on discard Dragon, or just Forte burst damage in Dragon in general. So having an additional source of 3 healing, bringing you up to 12 points of healing in the deck was really helpful. And yeah, it's still just being a one-of for Merlin to grab or play from grave. And the spice that did the most work, Fiery Embrace. So I was playing against an elephant player who also made it to top 8, and he was playing around the Rhyme Wind by evolving it in the same turn, the giant elephant, and he did not see this coming at all. So having just a unconditional removal for followers is very good. I feel like there's not enough big problem amulets in the format right now to justify execution, and the 3 damage this can provide, Spellchain 10, comes up a lot in terms of just closing out games. So that's it for spells and amulets. On to creatures. 3 Madrigal, goated 1-drop. If you see this in the early game and enough spells, you're probably winning that game. Similar discard engine. So I'm on Craig instead of Penguin Wizard. I was on Penguin Wizard right up until the event. I feel like just having a discard and draw card that doesn't care about needing spells specifically is helpful, because we do lean a little bit more into creatures or followers in this version. Speaking of creatures, the goated card, my new favorite card in the room, Europa. So for those of you who don't know what this does, it costs 2 to Evo, and then on Fanfare, you select a copy of the Europa Evolved card in your Evo deck, and you turn it face down to make this a +1/+1, so a 2/4. So already really good. Gonna jump ahead and just show off the swagged out ultimate of the Europa Evo. As you can see there, Storm, Bane, Ward on a 3/5 body that if you're going second can come out on turn 3. That's just really good because a lot of decks can't answer a 3/5 or a 4/6 that they have to deal with early in the game. And also, as you'll see in the Evo deck, this being able to get utility out of just running 1 card in the Evo deck comes up a lot and just helps you round out the Evo deck. Next up, speaking of good cards and good Evos, 3 Merlin, staple in pretty much any rune list. Searching any spell is bonkers still. Playing any 3 or less, you have so many good targets that I've already gone over. The Witch Bolt, the one-ofs, the Demonic Strike especially, so really good card. No more introduction. So this is the part that's going to make the amulet make sense. We're on 3 copies of Felice Leonardian Mage. So hitting Spellchain 7 just to get the deal 4 to the opponent's board, that's super doable. So having just a way to contest early aggro boards was really nice and what kind of pivoted me to different fights list because I felt I was getting run over by early aggressive board floods. And then literally just for having the Earthright, you give it Storm to add to that early game aggression that most Chimera decks don't have. So literally, like, you have the healing with the amulets, you have Storm or facilitating more draw with concentration. So I do really like that package, and I do think this is the superior way to play Chimera this format, but we'll see what Rune looks like next format, obviously. So another card that I've been really big on, even before Chimera, but especially with Chimera, obviously, is the Darius. So everyone knows the play with the Mystic Ring. You put the Chimera on bottom, turbo through your deck until you can guarantee get it with this, play it for 2, hit them for 30. But oftentimes, especially since you're playing a bit more of a mid-range version with this deck, sometimes you do just reach a point where you need to just play this, get rid of whatever like random cards you had left in your hand, just to get 5 new cards, and benefit off of Spellchains a bit easier. So I will find myself sometimes just playing this, even if I'm nowhere near a stacked Giant Chimera. Just to get the refill is really nice in this deck. Then lastly, 2 copies of What the Dog Doing, slash What the Snake Doing, slash What the Goat Doing. 7/7 Spellchain deal 30, especially in this list because you have a bit more of an early game. You are able to still capitalize off of the Spellchain 20 to deal 10, or sometimes even the Spellchain 10 to deal 5, just based on how much you've been able to be the aggressor in that game, and or just like turn the tide of the game by using the lower Spellchains just to wipe the opponent's board and go for game just by swinging face with 7 and maybe a Europa or something. So that's it for the main deck, 50 cards, but it hasn't really felt like a hindrance, even though normally you do want a small deck size for Chimera, just because you have so many ways of turboing through the deck, and the cards you're playing are just so efficient and value-oriented. So then going on to the Evo deck lastly, like I showed off before, the one Europa, once again, was not rocking the high rarity in the tournament, but she put in so much work for me all day that I felt the need to bling her out afterwards. Storm, Bane, Ward, early game, recursive, say less, love this card. Moving on, we have 3 copies of Craig, does the same thing as his base form on Evo, draw a card, ditch a card, so just helpful for digging you deeper into your deck. And it being a bit more aggressively statted, once again, a bit nicer than the Penguin Wizard, where you aren't really capitalizing on the rush. Then we have 3 Merlin Evos. I've been gassing this card up all profile, so I won't spend too much more time on it. Just good card is good. And then lastly, the 3 Daria Evos, dropping a spell and dropping a follower to 5 less is really good. So yeah, that is the profile. Lastly, I just want to shout out my teammates, my good friend Bill, who should also be posting a deck file pretty soon, and the love of my life, Allie, who was also on my team. Her profile's coming soon. And yeah, just shout out the Shadowverse community. Had a great time in White Plains, and really looking forward to hopefully rocking Rune in the formats to come. Peace out.
Hi everyone, this is Bill with the Abysscraft deck profile for Team Cook Billion. And this one is not Necrocharge, there is Necrocharge, but it's a discard Necrocharge Abyss, not Ektar. So, might as well get the bling out of the way. Start with the 1 costs, 4 copies of Bellringer, which is, I think, pretty staple for a discard Abysscraft. You really don't want to, you don't really have a lot of aggro early game, so you just want to kind of move on to the middle and late game as soon as possible. So Bellringer just kind of helps you, and plus you can pop a couple, or not a couple, but just 1 2 defense or lower creature in the early game if you need to with her Evo. So pretty par for the course for non-aggro decks. Next is 2 Soul Conversions, which 3 feels too cluttered, and Soul Conversion is a nice combo with Bellringer, where you can sacrifice her when somebody swings at her. The opponent will still be rested, but then you can still get, you basically draw 3 because of 1 from Bellringer and 2 from Soul Conversion, and then at least the attacking monster is tapped now, so you can kind of, on the crackback, kill it. Next are the size 2s, which are, first is pretty much a staple in every Abysscraft deck, 3 Punk Devils, 2 cost, 2/3, it gets Ward, and you can pay 2 to give it Bane, and when it dies, with the last word, you get 2 life. So pretty much a staple for every Abysscraft deck. Next size 2, which I was actually kind of skeptical at first, but I kind of grew to like it. Was I run 3 Uriels as another alternative 2 cost for the early game, which on Fanfare you put a Serpent in the EX area, and I'll put a Serpent in the on just so you can see what it does. And The second effect, as far as giving Stheno and Medusa Aura, literally has no effect in this deck. It's just for the easy 2-cost 2/2, and you can get a Serpent that's nice, where you can just kind of, like, even it's kind of nice just using the Serpent to swing into an enemy Bell Ringer, and it just insta-dies, and you still have the Serpent. But it does make your opponent have to kind of think about how they want to kind of dance around the Serpent. Sometimes they have to overcommit to kill it, so it's nice. Next is 2 cylinder, 2 costs, just 2 surefire bullets. There's a lot of good 3 defense monsters and 4 defense Evo monsters, so just a good way to just deal with them very easily. Next, with the 3 costs, is a fan favorite of the deck, 3 Crazed Executioners. He's a 3-cost 3/3, and he costs 1 to Evo, and his Evo is upon evolve, you take 2 damage, but you get to look at your opponent's hand and make them discard a card. So it's nice. It can help you keep their tempo down if they have a good card on the crackback, or if you see a big monster that you don't want to deal with later, like King Elephant, you can just make them discard it. Just put the evil cards back. All right. Next is 3 Nice Natures. There we go. Really good discard card. You can give her Erase if you need to. Sometimes I actually realize I didn't even need to erase her. I would just play her on turn 3 and just let her sit for a turn. And the -1, there's actually a decent amount of cards that, just with the 1 less cost, just kind of feels like you can manage with them easier. But yeah, I mean, it's discard Abyss, so obviously you're going to run Nice Natures for the discard. Next, which might be weird, but I run only 2 Find Motions. I do run only 2 Carrots, so between Nice Nature and Find Motions, it's usually enough of a mid-game monster quantity, and then Crazed Executioner as well. That I really 3 felt a little overkill for me. Like, you can run 3, like there's technically nothing wrong with it, but the deck does not necrocharge that fast, and that's honestly perfectly fine. The highest necrocharge in the deck is 10, and even then you don't really need 10 until like mid to late game, and by then you should be at about 10, so it's fine honestly if you don't even see Find Motion. Next is 2 Bone Chimera. Like I said, not a lot of necrocharge, but 7 is not a huge hurdle to cross either. And when I had 3, I saw him a little too early. So with 2, I saw him at least in the mid game enough where milling to 7, he at least like activated, and I didn't have to like have this awkward turn of having a 3-cost 1/1 that just did nothing. Next, which might be a little weird, but I kind of really like him, is 3 Soul Dealers. Yeah, he doesn't discard, but he has a big body, and he's kind of really annoying. And there's a lot of decks that like to summon Israfils and Bahamuts, and being able to just call, yeah, sure, you take 3 damage from the call, but then you just Evo to gain anywhere from 9 to 11 health back. It's just crazy, and you can just deal with something very easily. Maybe the worst thing, the only downside is maybe Forte, but Forte is not that hard to beat otherwise anyways, so it's not a big deal. Next is 2 Olivias. I only run 2 because 3 felt like I kind of started to see her a little too much. But, I mean, you can always call her back with Death's Breath as well. But I have another Dark Alice, which is actually up next, that I actually kind of like her more than Olivia for the deck. So, and usually with Olivia, I will usually do the draw card and they discard. Sometimes, like, let's say if they don't have a hand, I'll just say, gain 3 and draw a card. Or if maybe I'm kind of getting low on life, I'll just make them discard 1 and gain 3 life. It kind of varies, but I almost actually don't think I ever did the Evo point. So... Next, with the 6 costs, is 3 Dark Alices. This card seemed to be, everyone that I played with this card seemed to be the bane of their existence. They would commit so much to try to kill it one time, and even after they killed it one time, I'd be like, cool, I'll just banish 10, discard a card, and she's back. And, on the next turn, I'll just make you discard another card. She's just really obnoxious. I even at one point banished 20 in one game because I just needed her presence. And that's why I kind of it might be weird that I don't have a lot of Necrocharge in this deck, but honestly, because of things like Dark Alice, I want a little bit of, milling, but not an insane amount. And so with, the Nice Nature and the Bone Chimera being at 2 each, it kind of keeps it where it's there and it helps, but it's not detrimental to the deck. So, but otherwise, I mean, Dark Alice is just insane. Next is Death's Breath, which is at 3. You always play this card at 3. There's no reason not to. And it can bring back quite a few beefy monsters. Even, either like Dark Alice or Olivia, they at least get Ward too, so at least they're a nice defense. I mean, there's really not much else to say. You summon your big dudes with Death's Breath. That's pretty self-explanatory. Next, as another Death's Breath option, is as a 7 cost, is Alucard. Not maybe as much of a higher priority compared to, like, let's say Olivia or Dark Alice, but if you have it where you want to hit for 6 or honestly even 4 is fine. Like the +2 attack with the Necrocharge 10 is just icing on the cake. Like, it's not mandatory. But it's another alternative option if you need some more life and you need a little bit of board wipe and you still want to hit your opponent for 4 to 6. And you'd still get Ward from Death's Breath. So he's just another good option depending on what's going on the board. Next is pretty much a staple, I think, for almost every Abysscraft deck. But Azazel, 2 copies. Pretty straightforward. You summon them. Your opponent randomly discards a card and you Evo to make your opponent's life down to 10. So at least any Havencraft players or just, massive life gain players, you really don't have to worry about their life during the game because, like mid to late game, you'll just play Azazel, their life is 10 now, and then you just try to either, you can go for Alucard, or if you have a Olivia that survived, the opponent's turn by banishing 10 and discarding a card, you can just hit for 10 with, or 6 with Olivia. So you got a few options there. And then last, as a Death's Breath option, is Israfil. I mean, card's just insane to be able to Death's Breath an 8 cost. But upon fanfare, you gain 4, and its strike is it deals 3 to the board, but you're going to normally evolve this, and the strike will do 5 instead. So pretty standard for, I think, discard Abysscraft. And then as far as the Evo deck goes, just 1 Bell Ringer. Usually you'll just play it early game, if at all, and that's pretty much it. I'll just leave on the screen here. And then 2 Crazed Executioners. Rarely will you probably see 3, so 2 is fine. 2 Carrots for the 2 Nice Nature and... No, sorry. 2 Fine Motion, 3... No, I got that swapped. 2 Fine Motions and 3 Nice Natures. There we go. My brain can get the horse girls right. And even then, like, the Nice Nature racing is not even, like, mandatory, so it's fine. I mean, like, obviously you can just crash Nice Nature with the carrot into something, but, you don't have to. It's kind of situational. Then next is 2 Soul Dealers. That you got to get that massive life gain, And then 2 Israfils, because she's going to be one of the bigger ones you're probably going to want to call from time to time, especially when you set your life to 10 with Azazel. So, yeah, that's pretty much it. So, shout out to Allie and AJ for being awesome teammates, and it was fun. Everyone, even in top 8, was pretty chilling and pretty good people. So,